Goodwill, nobility, and the human spirit are meant to be the hallmarks of international sporting events like the Olympics and the World Cup. Yet so often these ideals are compromised by politics, money, and infighting. Never was this more true than in the awarding of a World Cup to two historical enemies, Japan and South Korea. Football is followed by billions around the world, and the head of FIFA is a powerful man. In the world of sports, perhaps only the head of the International Olympic Committee has more influence. When he speaks, everyone listens. So back in the early 1990s, when João Havelange said that Japan was the ideal place to hold the 2002 World Cup, it could have only one meaning. FIFA would stage the 2002 event in Japan. Havelange and his Swiss General Secretary, Sepp Blatter, started to turn Japan's hopes of hosting the World Cup into a reality. No matter that the decision was to be decided by FIFA's Executive Committee. No matter that Mexico had also thrown its hat into the ring. No matter that Japan didn't even have a professional league. Havelange was sure all these hurdles could be overcome and he would have his way. But he wouldn't. On May the 31st, 1996, Havelange announced the long-awaited decision as to who would get to host the 2002 World Cup. The decision of the Executive Committee, he told the world, was that the event would be co-hosted by Japan and South Korea. It was a stunning bolt from the blue for the world of football. Only 10 days previously, Blatter had written to me in response to a pair of articles I had published in the Japan Times, in which I called on FIFA to allow the two countries to share the World Cup. Blatter told me that co-hosting could not happen because it was not permissible under FIFA regulations. And yet here was Blatter 10 days later, implying that it was he who had persuaded the president to accept the fact of co-hosting. Blatter succeeded Havelange as president of FIFA and was forced to overcome his opposition to co-hosting. What I said was that it is a difficult task to co-host, and it is not according to our statutes, Blatter explained. There is still one World Cup, but the expenses are doubled, and the income must be shared. It's not easy, but now I am in charge, and it is during my 4-year term as president that this World Cup is being played, and I will back this World Cup 100%. It was not my decision to have co-hosting, but I said I have to accept it. In truth, Blatter had wanted the World Cup to go to Japan as much as Havelange. Quite why FIFA's two top men were so enthusiastic about the Japanese bid remains something of a mystery, although the financial power of the Japanese was an obvious attraction. Nevertheless, all three parties, Havelange, Blatter, and Japan, were thwarted by their enemies within FIFA. Once South Korea had joined the race, the two countries poured money into their bid campaigns, but their efforts were to prove futile. The toxic politics of FIFA ended up throwing two nations that despised each other into the same arena. Now they had to work together to stage the biggest single sporting event in the world. Like their Olympic counterparts, FIFA, especially in the latter part of the 20th century, saw their flagship events more as commercial endeavours than sporting showcases. In theory, sport should be the beneficiary, but it is clear that a lot of people, both inside and outside sport, are making money, both legally and illegally. Football has experienced a massive boom in the last 30 years. Just look at the Premier League in England, the Champions League in Europe, the J-League in Japan, and the rise of women's football. Companies are paying vast sums to be associated with football's premier events. Havelange was well aware of this, and he turned towards the world's biggest business markets, the United States and Japan, to raise football's market price, which, it was felt, had been seriously undervalued. The United States was awarded the 1994 World Cup despite having no discernible football league. They also failed to qualify for every World Cup from 1954 to 1986. What it did have was a large population with many immigrants who grew up playing or watching football. It was also a predominantly English-speaking country with some great stadiums. It had experience in hosting huge events, an excellent transportation network, and last but not least, the biggest economy in the world. In the early 1990s, Japan was also a weak footballing nation. Before 1992, its main claim to footballing fame was winning the bronze medal at the 1968 Mexico Olympics. It did have a strong amateur league consisting of company teams. It also had a large potential market of 125 million, as well as the second biggest economy in the world. By the end of the 1980s, it appeared as though Japan owned most of the world and produced everything in it. Havilangi could see the power of the dollar and the yen. Sell football in these countries and football would be forever rich. No matter that Japan didn't have a professional league, had never qualified for the World Cup finals, or was many miles away from the established football centres and TV viewing audiences of Europe and South America. Japan had what FIFA wanted. Mexico didn't stand a chance. Besides, it had held the World Cup in 1970 and again in 1986, when Brazil was forced to pull out due to economic difficulties. Football did not want a repeat of 1986. Bankrupt countries need not apply, was the message from FIFA. The US and Japan presented no such problems. Japan's football credentials gained a major boost in 1992 when it won the Asian Cup for the first time, and in 1993 when it started a star-studded professional football league, the J-League. Suddenly, football was booming in Japan. Tickets were like gold dust, and crowds of up to 60,000 filled Tokyo's National Stadium and other venues to watch the likes of Kazumiura, Pierre Littbarski, Zico and Gary Lineker. With football fashionable in this economic powerhouse, it seemed that nothing could stop Japan earning the rights to the 2002 World Cup. Except South Korea. Like most Asian countries, South Korea had never really considered bidding for the World Cup. FIFA had split its biggest tournament between Europe and South America, plus Mexico, since the first competition in Uruguay in 1930. The remaining confederations, Africa, Asia, CONCACAF and Oceania, were patronized rather than embraced. Although South Korea had qualified for 4 World Cups, it had never won a game and was considered a lightweight in world terms. But it still considered itself superior to Japan as a footballing nation. Japan, after all, had never even qualified for the World Cup. The footballing rivalry between the two countries was intense. In reality, they weren't so far apart in footballing terms, but the true rivalry was political and historical, and went far, far deeper than FIFA could have imagined.